Today's show is an interview with Nate Kehlmeier, CEO of the Recovery Institute of Ohio, located in Sandusky, Ohio. You're listening to the Pharmacist's Voice podcast, a journey-style podcast about my career pivot from pharmacist to voice actor. I'm your host, Kim Newlove. I alternate solo shows and interview shows. The solo shows are about my career change, and the interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate, educate, or entertain. Thank you for joining me for episode 7, an interview with Nate Kehlmeier. This interview was recorded in November of 2019. Nate and I met through our volunteer work with the Wood County Opiate Task Force in Bowling Green, Ohio. He has been sober since 2008, and he advocates for substance use disorder treatment and recovery, as well as drug abuse prevention education. Without further ado, here's my interview with Nate Kehlmeier. Good morning, Nate. Thanks for joining me on the Pharmacist's Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for coming out. I know it was a cold drive, long drive, very cold out there this morning.
Well, I had to see your new place.
Yeah, we're very blessed out here.
Yeah, so what's this new place called?
It's called Recovery Institute of Ohio. It is a 18-bed residential and outpatient facility in Sandusky, Ohio.
Very good. And how did we meet?
How we met? The Wood County Opiate Task Force. We were both part of a group in Wood County that's helping fight the drug epidemic, and that's where we met at. And we've done a couple collaborations together in churches doing public speaking.
Right. Yep, I've really enjoyed seeing you change and grow and become a CEO now of the Recovery Institute of Ohio, which you founded by yourself, right? And then
I have a couple other guys that are partners with me that, they're co-founders also. But at the end of the day, the idea was mine, and I kind of put this program together. I have been working in the treatment industry for almost 11 years now, and I've been in every aspect, every position besides a clinical therapist. I'm not a clinical therapist, but I've been a director of admissions, director of marketing, so I know the business end of it. I was a director of housing. I was a program director, so I know a lot when it comes to treatment, and I've brought what I've learned over the last 11 years into this program.
Then how would you say this all got started?
Well, I like I said, I've been working in the field for a while. Being in Ohio right now, Ohio has been devastating the last few years with the opiate epidemic. And working in the industry, I've learned that working at facilities that are smaller and more intimate are pretty successful. And I've always worked for other facilities, and I decided I wanted to do my own thing. So I reached out to some friends of mine, and we put together the funding to get this started. Our investors are family members of people who've been through addiction. So we put this together and created this, and we get to work hand in hand every single day.
Why do you think you're so effective at what you do?
Well, I've personally been through it. I started out, I had a good childhood. I started using drugs and alcohol at the age of 18. I became fully addicted to opiates at the age of 21, and I got sober at 25. So I've personally been through it, and this disease of addiction is very progressive, and I got to see how progressive it really was. I started out with eating a couple pills a day to shooting heroin every single day. I had a lot of serious consequences. I hurt a lot of people. But today I have all those people back in my life, and, it's a blessing I get to help others.
It's been awesome for me to watch you be so effective at what you're doing because you have been there. And I don't want you to think that this sounds harsh, but I think you don't take any excuses from people. I mean, you really take the excuses away because you've been there. And when they feed you a line that you've heard, you know how to handle it. And if somebody who has an addiction disorder hears me talking about how they need help, it's less effective than somebody who's been there, in
Right.
my opinion. And what I've seen you do is just reach people and be very effective at it. And I think the world needs more people like you who are in long-term recovery, who are effective at helping others achieve sobriety and recovery too.
Thank you. And I mean, the only reason why, I mean, I can't say it's the only reason why, but one of the main reasons why I do what I do is because when I got sober, there was people ahead of me that do what I do now. So like, I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for the guys that I met that were sober who could teach me how to like myself again. You know, it took a long time for me to get to that point, but they showed me how to be happy. And then I started learning life again and how to live life and be successful and be, and be a family person and show people love and realize it's not about me anymore. You know, I got rid of a lot of that self-centeredness and I get to focus on other people. And it's not just the people that are in recovery and not the people that are using drugs. It's also the families, you know, because I see family members go through a lot of trauma from their loved ones using drugs and alcohol. So, you know, I get to be a support for family members also. And that's probably, honestly, my favorite thing to do is talk to them, just be some help for a family member.
Are you still running that support group was it Woodville?
Yeah, it was in Woodville. It was called Families Recover Too, but it kind of dissolved out. We weren't getting a very good attendance. But we started another one called We Recover Together, and it's in Bellevue. And they meet the second and fourth Thursday of every month.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. We had our meeting last night. We had about 10 people in attendance. It went pretty well. There's a new program out in Bellevue that's a resource for people in recovery, just to come to get support groups. It's not a treatment center, but it's like an open door for people to come in that are in recovery. There's computers set up where they can get online and look for work, and it's kind of like I don't know how to put it. It's like a resource center, but for people in recovery, and it's called Bellevue Recovery Services. And we started the family support group out there. The lady who started it, she unfortunately lost her son to an addiction. She works for the Bellevue Hospital, and she wanted to make a difference in the community, so she opened up Bellevue Recovery Services.
That's great that there are services out here in Sandusky. I know that you, like me, are from a small town in Northwest Ohio, and before you came here to Sandusky, you were elsewhere, right? Can you tell me where you were before this?
I was a director of admissions at Midwest Recovery Center in Toledo. Great program. But I felt like it was time for me to branch off and do my own thing. And my family is still in Genoa, small town, Ohio, Genoa. And I decided to do Sandusky. I decided to open up here because the model of treatment that I use is not here. And Sandusky sits directly halfway between Toledo and Cleveland. So I chose Sandusky, and it's also only 35 minutes from my mom. Oh. So it's close. So I moved out here, and I still can get to my family and visit. And like I said, we're halfway between Toledo and Cleveland. I think it's a great location. Not only Cedar Point is here, but it's right on the lake, so...
Are you still close with your family then?
Yes. I mean, it took a little bit of time when I first got into recovery for them to trust me. I caused a lot of damage while I was using. I lied to them. I stole from them. But now I'm real close with my family. I actually had dinner with my mom and my sister the other night. I talk to my dad almost every day. I see him a couple times a week. I'm leaving the day after Thanksgiving to spend 6 days with my dad playing golf in Myrtle Beach, and I'm very excited about that. But when I was using drugs and alcohol, that didn't matter to me. You know, I did not care about my family. Not that I didn't care, but they weren't priority to me. Priority was getting high, and I didn't care what I did to have to hurt them to get high. So now I get to, make those amends and get their trust back, and I get to see them and spend time, and they call me when they're going through something now, and it's a good feeling.
Good. So can I ask about what medication-assisted treatment is used here?
So the only medication-assisted treatment that we do here at Recovery Institute of Ohio is Vivitrol. So we don't do any Suboxone or Methadone. Clients do come in dirty for Suboxone sometimes just because they go through a detox. I do not have residential detox, so I refer off for detox. We're the next level of care after detox. But here, the only medication-assisted treatment that we do is Vivitrol.
Now, how do you address stigma? You were talking about the support group, And I know I'm jumping around with topics a little bit. So when you have a support group, is stigma something that you talk about?
Always. I mean, there's always going to be a stigma. I think it's a lot better now than it was a few years ago. People are starting to actually see like this is not a, it is a disease. Addiction is a disease, and people are starting to see that it can be anybody, that it does not discriminate. A lot of people are being affected, people that are professionals and lawyers and pastors. And I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy things. But the stigma part of it, there's always going to be stigma. But it's always something that we always a subject that gets discussed about.
As a pharmacist, we have the Ohio Automated RX Reporting System. It's our prescription drug monitoring program. And when I was a practicing pharmacist, one of the things that I would notice is patterns, the doctor shopping, pharmacy hopping. What is something that you could tell pharmacists that would help them with stigma and getting people help when they see these patterns and they see somebody that needs help? Because when I was a practicing pharmacist, I didn't feel like I understood what's the next step to get somebody help. How do I know if I'm barking up the right tree and I have concerns?
I mean, even if you're a pharmacist, step out of the situation. Like you even if you're a pharmacist and you're an employee there, picture yourself not as an employee. Remove yourself and just be a person. Be a human being. I want to help this person. People that are struggling. You see the same people coming in every single week, getting their prescription, getting whatever they're getting. Me personally, I had, and this was before that OR system came out, the OR system that you were talking about. I had 4 pharmacies I would go to, and they didn't know, I was coming paying out of pocket buying prescription pills. They didn't know at the time. I think it's great that they put that system together, so now all the pharmacies are connected and they can see if somebody's, doctor shopping or going to pharmacy to pharmacy to pharmacy. I remember when I would go get a prescription filled at a pharmacy, I would drop it off and they would tell me 15 minutes and I would be there 4 minutes later, like, is it done yet? And I'd be hounding them. And that's always a sign like, okay, why does this person need this prescription so bad? If somebody's coming in to get an antibiotic and they're like, okay, it'll be ready in a half an hour, usually they don't pick it up till that afternoon. So, I mean, if it's like a normal person, but people in addiction, they're just going to keep hounding because they want that medication. They need it.
I used to have people show up at midnight because things wouldn't go through on their insurance. And I'm using air quotes because, they knew that they were early on it. And I had my suspicions that there was a problem. But as a pharmacist, all I can do is deny them their medicine, which I never felt comfortable with. I didn't understand why they were out early. Why were they not following the directions? Why didn't the doctor address the situation? Over the years, I've come to find out, and through my interactions with people at the Opiate Task Force and meeting people like you and meeting people who are in prevention and treatment and education, I've realized what the problem is. They're addicted. I didn't know enough about addiction while I was a pharmacist. And one of my hopes from interviewing you today is that anybody that hears this will realize that the way that somebody gets into addiction is various. And one of the ways is by taking prescription pills. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I feel really bad about is often when people can't get their prescription pills, they turn to heroin. And I see you smiling and nodding your head because is that how you got into heroin?
Well, I mean, I got into heroin because I got to a point where I was doing OxyContin and it was really expensive. So heroin was a lot cheaper. But I am starting to see that more. People that are addicted to opiate medication, with the regulations now, with the pharmacies and the regulations with the doctors, it's not as easy to get them as it was when I was using. And like you said, they're switching over to heroin, which is causing, more the numbers going up in overdoses.
Yeah, I don't know how to stop all of this. It's nobody knows the answer. And I feel like by getting involved with my county's opiate task force and meeting people like you who are in recovery, I just see the depth of the problem and the various ways that people get into addiction. It's hard. It's hard to see and not to know the answer because I want to help. I just don't know how. So hopefully by talking about this, it helps with awareness.
Well, I don't want you to ever feel like you're you cause some of this because you're a pharmacist. Your job is to fill people's prescriptions. You know what I mean? And that's your focus. That's what you're supposed to do. Same thing with the doctors. There's a lot of stigma on doctors. Doctors are quick to write prescription pills. Well, I mean, the doctor's job is to make sure that there's no pain. So, of course, they're going to write pain medication. Maybe sometimes they do a little bit more than they should. But, I can never blame the doctor. I can never blame the pharmacist. I can't blame anybody but myself. And there's options and there's resources for people to get better. People that are using, they know that there's options. You can't really blame the medical field for your addiction.
I appreciate that, but I can't help feeling bad about participating in a broken system. I think that's probably the fairest statement, because I've met so many people who have lost their children, and I've seen what a hole that leaves. And it's not just the parents, but their friends are wondering, what happened? Why didn't I see it? And it just leaves such a hole in somebody's life. The ripple effect, I think, is what I've heard people say. And I'm glad there's support groups out there. There's so many different support groups out there. And I'll try to put some of them in the show notes for this podcast. I like that there's help out there, but it's just hard to connect people from all angles. The friends that have lost someone, they don't know that there's a support group out there necessarily. Mm-hmm. And you are in recovery and you're leading a support group for people who have maybe lost somebody, maybe their family member is going through active addiction, and you can help. And I hope that this podcast reaches some people who need some help, some support, because it's okay to need some support.
Absolutely. And the longer you hold it in, the more that it's going to get bad. Especially if you know your loved one's using. It's not going to change because you hope it changes. It's going to change because you actually look into getting some resources and getting educated. A little bit ago, you mentioned, I don't know what the answer is for this. And I mean, I don't know the answer. I'm not a doctor. But with all over the years of my experience, what I've been doing, I think the only way that this is ever going to get better is educating the youth. And, it's very important for parents to get involved with their kids' lives. I see it when you go to a restaurant now and you walk in and a family sitting at the table. What do you see? You see mom and dad sitting there having a conversation and the kids are playing on their electronics. There's not a question. There's no uncomfortable questions being asked. And I always bring that up whenever I do public speaking. My mom and dad, they raised me. They did what they were supposed to. They loved me. They took care of me. They provided for me, but they never had uncomfortable conversations with me. They never said, Nate, you're gonna feel like crap, and this is how you handle those feelings. They never had those conversations with me. And I think it's very important for families to get involved with their children and educate them and see what they know about drugs. See what they know about, who can they turn to if they need help, or if they know a friend that's using, how can they talk to a counselor or something about their friend that's using drugs?
What are a couple of questions that a parent could ask a child? I love that you just said, what do you know about drugs? But some of those other uncomfortable questions, it almost sounded like you were leading to coping skills. Is that kind of what you're talking about? How would you deal with something uncomfortable?
Right. I mean, when it comes to a parent, kids nowadays, a lot of people, not even just kids, adults too, if they're going through something, they don't want people to know. Even now, if I'm going through something, I kind of have this figure, people look at me kind of okay, you're in recovery, you're doing well, this and that. But I go through stuff also. And if I hold that stuff in, it builds up. So getting your kids to learn how to communicate is key. And letting them know, every action that you have, there's going to be consequences that come along with it, and you have to learn. They have to learn that at an early age. Communication and consequences. I'm very huge on that. If a kid does something he shouldn't be doing, there should be some kind of consequence, or else he's going to continue doing it. And then those behaviors lead into more behaviors. And then when they're going through a feeling, talking to somebody, whether it's their school counselor or even a professional counselor, or even mom and dad, they to be there for support for them.
That is such excellent advice. Thank you. I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, and my younger son, Derek, is at that age where if he does something behind my back and gets away with it, it's accidentally positive reinforcement. You got away with it. If you do it again, I'm probably not going to see it. And then, that accidentally reinforces bad behavior. Hopefully there's nothing too bad going on in the background, but you don't know until you know. Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, sometimes the consequences are really bad, and then the parents are putting their hands up like, I knew this was going to happen. Why didn't I try to prevent it or intervene earlier? Like with me using drugs and alcohol, like my mom, everybody knew, but they didn't intervene right away. They kind of were like, okay, you know what? This is just a little part of his life that he's doing right now. And, he'll change because that's not who he is and that's not how he was brought up. And, and it progressively got worse. And they could have intervened. I'm not saying that it would have changed my path at all, but they could have intervened earlier and it could have been something completely different than the outcome that I had.
We have a mutual friend with the Opiate Task Force, and she said that one of the things that she didn't know about was enabling. She didn't realize that she was enabling her daughter to continue using because she would pay her bills. And she would say, okay, I'm going to be the mom and I'm going to help you get out of this. And can you speak a little bit about enabling and maybe about even in the support groups, how you address that and tell people how to deal with that in their own situation?
So, enabling is always going to be, in my opinion, enabling is always going to be there. Family, especially mothers, I've always seen it. Personally, my mom enabled me. They love us to death, but it's, as a kid, a mom's job was to make sure their kid was safe. And then you grow up to an adult and they still have that mentality, like, this is my son, this is my loved one. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure he's okay. I don't care how much it affects me or anybody around me. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure he's okay. I'll tell you a story. A mom who's a supervisor and has people working for her was being affected by her son's actions from using drugs. And she went to work one day, and her employees, she wasn't the supervisor she normally is, and she was really mean to her employees that day. Well, one of the employees went home and was really mean to her family and came in the next day and was like, I just want to let you know that I had a really rough night with my family last night because of how you were treating us yesterday. And it was all because of her son, who was using drugs and alcohol, was making her feel that way. So it's like a domino effect. You don't realize it around you because your main focus is, how's my son? Is he okay? And it takes away from what you need to be worried about in life. Enabling is like, one thing I've learned is that you can't want somebody's recovery more than them. And that's something I always say to parents, like, you can't want their recovery more than them. So if you're paying their bills because you think that their recovery is going to be better, it's not going to be. If somebody's using drugs and alcohol, you should not be paying anything. The only thing a family member should be doing is telling them that they love them and give them a ride to treatment if they want to go to treatment.
I've seen it done other ways where families will spend down inheritances. But how do you feel about parents paying for the drug rehab? Who do you think should pay for it?
I think if it's, I got mixed feelings about it. Obviously you want to see your loved one get better. If I had a kid who was sick and was going to the hospital and it was going to cost me $10,000 for him to get medically treated in a hospital for whatever he's got going on, I would pay it. So I kind of look at it that way. Like, your kid is sick. He's going to be going to treatment to get better. If you have the funds and you can do it, do it. But if you really got to know, like, if the kid really wants treatment. Now, the first time I went to inpatient treatment, my parents actually paid cash for me to go. But I also had intervention done. So it wasn't me saying, hey, I need to go get help. It was them saying, hey, you need to go get help. So I didn't take it serious, and I relapsed. So, and they lost that money. So, if a family is willing to pay for somebody to go to treatment, I would always look at the person that's using, if they're the one seeking it. Okay, you want me to pay for your treatment? You go out, you find a facility, you tell me how much it is, you put the footwork in, but I'll help you financially.
So what do you love most about your job?
Seeing people change. I get the chance, I get to see people change. People come in, they're ready to make a change. They ask me a lot of questions. I am the CEO. I am, one of the co-founders, but my door is always open. And clients come in and they sit in my office and they talk to me about recovery, and it's very rewarding for me to see that happen. And I've always been hands-on when I worked in facilities, and just day 1 to day 30 or day 60 or however long they're here, it's just that transition it's amazing.
Do you find that you have people coming to you that have tried other facilities or other programs and have failed or relapsed, and then they find success here?
Yeah, we've had a few clients that have been to multiple treatment centers that have come here and been successful. We actually have a gentleman here who I just employed last week who went through our program. He was one of our first coming in, and he's been to multiple treatment centers, and he gets to work with the clients now, which is great. You know what I mean? I get to see that transition. It's huge because I remember when he came in broken, and now he's helping people that are broken.
You can't ask for a better happy ending than that. I love it. One thing that I learned through our friendship and our interactions is that when someone goes for help, they're in a recovery center, they're getting treatment. There's lots of different kinds of treatment. There's the inpatient, the outpatient, the intensive outpatient. There's residential. There's all kinds of different kinds. And what I thought was whatever you go to is going to work the first time, right?
No.
Well, no. Can you address that? Like, what is the path for people? Do you have a rate of relapse, or can you address that?
So, I mean, for me personally, I went to treatment for 28 days in relapse. I went to outpatient for, it was supposed to be for 4 months, but I only did about a month, and then I relapsed. I noticed that people who actually come into treatment, they do 30 to 45 days inpatient. They'll do 7 to 10 days detox, 30 to 45 days inpatient, and then step down and continue care in an outpatient level for 4 or 5 months. They have a better chance. They're more successful. The people that are only going to treatment for 7 days, thinking that all they need is detox, I don't ever really see anybody actually stay sober doing that. People who only go to treatment for inpatient 30 days and then jump back into life without having some kind of aftercare, they struggle also. I don't really see a lot of people be successful that way. So this is it's long term. I went to jail for 60 days, and then I went to treatment for 28 days, and then I lived in a halfway house for 9 months. So that's why, that really helped me. I didn't jump back into life right away. I had to steadily get back into life and learn how to work and be accountable and responsible and all the stuff I didn't do while I was using.
Is there a sober living house in Sandusky that you refer people to so they can have a break before they jump back into real life? I mean,
that's one of the biggest struggles with Ohio right now is finding sober living. The sober living homes that are available are always full. There's a few local resources, but they're always full. So it's hard finding sober living for people. I think that's, we're talking about a broken system when it comes to the treatment industry in the state of Ohio. I think there needs to be more aftercare beds. I think there's plenty of inpatient beds. There needs to be more aftercare beds for people who are stepping down out of inpatient and getting back on their feet and getting back into life, like a halfway house. A halfway house is halfway from where you were to where you want to be. And that transition right there is very key in your life, especially early in recovery.
When somebody goes into a halfway house or a sober living situation, does there need to be some sort of a supervisor there to encourage a schedule and all the different parts of life that have been really neglected? Food prep, grocery shopping, all those daily routines and skills. Does there need to be somebody there?
Yeah, I mean, my halfway house, I had somebody there that, okay, listen, you're going to a 12-step meeting tonight. It was a requirement to get a job. I'm going to teach you how to interview. I'm going to show you how to dress up, look appropriate, look presentable, clean your room, I've always been told, making your bed is very key, especially when you're early in recovery. And if you start your day making your bed, and even with 12 years sober, I make my bed every day. Believe it or not, my bed is made right now. And I do. And it's something I got in a routine of, because I was always told at the beginning, if you have a messy bed, you have a messy head. And I would come home, and if my bed wasn't made, it just didn't feel right. So like I'm in a routine, and that's what it is getting in that routine, and even if it's something small, because a lot of them, people don't take care of their personal hygiene, brushing your teeth every morning, make your bed, fold your clothes, line up your shoes, make everything look neat, because when you get in that little routine, life starts becoming a routine.
What's the best thing that's happened to you since you've started your business here?
Honestly, probably the acceptance from the community. That was always a fear coming here. Because I do a lot of work out in Ottawa County. I know a lot of people in Ottawa County, but this is different, Erie County. I'm not too familiar with people out here in Sandusky. But the community has been very accepting. A lot of people have reached out to me asking if they could donate stuff, asking people to call me and ask me if they can volunteer. And that's just a great feeling for me. Because along with stigma, I thought the community was going to be like, oh, no, this is not good. We have 3 houses where the clients actually live, and it's in a neighborhood, and the neighbors have been great. The backyard that backs up to our backyard, the older lady, she's so happy that we have that there. And it's been a very good feeling.
I love a happy ending. Thank you. That's a great story.
I mean, that's, if I had to think about it, it's probably the greatest thing that's happened since, besides people getting sober and staying sober, but that's, that's part of the job here. But like, it's been pretty great, and it's made my life a lot easier.
What a nice surprise, though, too, because the opioid crisis has gotten a lot of press and a lot of people know about it. But to actually put a face with people who are in recovery and know that they're just people, too, and they're just trying to move on with their lives and achieve sobriety, that's got to be so cool for the community to feel like they're a part of it. Like, I'm seeing this happen. Everybody loves that big reveal. Somebody's been working towards something, and then they achieve their goal. They get to see it. And
it's great. Like, I spoke to a group the other night, and it was a little bit older group, but at the end of every time I speak, I always give a little bit of time for people to ask questions. And I can't tell you, there was like 3 or 4 women who were just like, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And they haven't been directly affected by addiction. They didn't tell me like, hey, I have a son or a grandson, or they just were like, genuinely were like, what can I do to help you? And it's like, that's such a good feeling, because with the stigma and like, why do these people want to help out with something that doesn't even impact their lives, but they see that it's impacting everybody around them.
What's a common question people ask you when you do public speaking about your story from use to sobriety?
You want to know, and I don't know if I want to get into this topic, but pretty much every time I speak, I have somebody ask me how I feel about medical marijuana. And that's always a question, and do I think marijuana is a gateway drug? And, and I don't like to get into it too much, because sometimes it can become into a little, get a little controversy and some arguments. And my feeling on it is, over the last 11 years, I've done a lot of assessments. I met a lot of people that were coming into treatment trying to get better. And I could tell you that probably 85% of them started off with smoking weed. So smoking marijuana, and I'm not saying that it's not needed for medical. I think once marijuana comes, if everybody is on the same page and people start using marijuana for medical reasons, you'll see overdoses go down. But I still firmly believe that it is a gateway drug, and that it will take you to other drugs.
That's interesting. I didn't know that people asked you that. That wasn't really my first question.
Really?
No. I don't remember what I first thought. You blew me away, though. The first time I heard you speak, I don't know if you even knew I was in the audience. It was at Way Public Library in Perrysburg, Ohio, and the sheriff was there. The county coroner was there. I can't remember who else. It seems like there was 4 people. Matt Bell was there. And I heard your story and his story. And I didn't know how some drug addicts became drug addicts and what inspired them to find sobriety and what worked for them. I learned a lot. And I think I was so awestruck by your testimony and Matt's testimony that I was speechless. I didn't have any questions.
It's and like I'm in a routine now of doing it. Like I don't even think about it, and I feel like I'm repetitive all the time just because when I speak, I'm speaking about the same thing. It's my story. It's my life, but I don't realize that there's people that have never heard my story, and actually have never heard anybody's story that somebody's in recovery. So, and I always got to keep that in mind. But I love doing that, and I think that it's very important because, like you said, with social media and the news and everything, there's so much stigma on how bad addiction is. The news and everybody they don't really put people in recovery out there. They put more people that are using. They talk about overdoses because that draws attention. They don't really talk about the people that are actually in recovery doing well. And there's a lot of us out there that are doing a lot of good work.
I've got to ask you, because I'm a pharmacist, what do you think pharmacists can do or should be doing to help with the opioid crisis?
Just get educated. I mean, you guys know about pain medication, the strengths, but educate why people are actually doing what they're doing. I think it's very important to know that, so that you're not judging. You don't have that stigma. You're not getting angry. It's like first responders. You guys are like first responders. You're helping people. When you're filling medications, you're actually helping people. And first responders, they have a little bit of stigma too, and they see the repetitiveness, and they see people overdose, and then they overdose again that next week. But like, we're human beings. We're supposed to be here to help people. And regardless of being a pharmacist or a first responder, you should be helping people and have a kind heart and not be so self-centered.
I think that's fair. When I started going to the Wood County Opiate Task Force, I learned that in Wood County, Ohio, the Bowling Green area, they have prevention education in the schools. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I thought they had nothing, and I wanted to help them put something there. I didn't know about all the treatment centers. I worked at one, but I needed to know more. And what I ended up doing by getting educated, going to meetings, meeting people, was that I could become a resource to my community, to my church, to other pharmacists. And whatever they didn't know, I could help them understand and say, hey, I've been in the meetings. I've met the people. I can help you get connected. And so there's so many pharmacists out there that say they want to go talk in schools to kids, and that's fine. I've done that too. I feel like poisoning prevention and, drug abuse prevention kind of go hand in hand. Of course, a pharmacist should be involved. But just being a resource is so effective because there's so many people I can reach. I felt like I wanted to be the headliner, though, at first. And really, I don't think I have anything more to add than anybody else. We're all on the same team. We're all tackling the same problem. A lot of people are handling it from a different angle. I'm just going to be out in the periphery, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And so to pharmacists out there that want to go to the schools and talk to people, I say that's fine. But more than anything, go out there and become a resource. Get educated. Meet people like Nate Kehlmeier. Get to know them. Get to know their story. Get to know about the groups that they're leading. There's so much I want to say here, but I'm going to stop. But I just want to speak to pharmacists and say, hey, be a resource. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Be
a resource. And if you want to see things change, that's the only way. Things aren't going to get better. Things aren't going to change unless you educate yourself and become a resource. You're just going to be that person that's going to sit back and be like, this person's using drugs. He needs to change his life, but not do anything about it. That's how I look at it. My sister helped put together a program at Owens Corning in Toledo because she was affected by my using, and it just a resource. She's a resource at Owens Corning for people that are struggling, so you don't have to be directly impacted by it to be a resource either. Everybody's affected some way. So
just being aware of the issues that affect people with addiction disorders in the medical community, I think we need to be aware that people neglect their health when they're using, and they need help finding their health again. Another thing that I noticed was that transportation is a big issue. Do you have any problems in Sandusky with people accessing services here at the Recovery Institute of Ohio because of transportation?
Well, we provide transportation, so I don't use too much with public transportation. We provided transportation, so when people are coming to groups, we pick them up. So we don't really run into a transportation issue here. I know that Sandusky does have a public transportation system. So no, I don't really run into a problem. I know that is an issue, especially in the cities and people that are living out in the country. They live in small towns. It's hard for them to get into the city.
Yeah, and when you use drugs and you make bad choices, what happens to your driver's license?
Most of my clients right now are still working on getting their driver's license back. You know,
Right.
that's part of recovery too. Is you got to fix those problems. But a lot of people lose their driver's license and they get some kind of charges and they're on probation and they're trying to get their lives back in order.
And how easy is it to get car insurance when you've had problems?
I mean, if you had DUIs and accidents because of your drugs and alcohol, you're paying a lot of money. It's going to be really hard to get your car insurance.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I never had a DUI. I've never had an accident. I did have an accident one time, but it was
Unrelated?
It was related, but it was on Christmas Day, and I kind of talked to family and did not calling the police just because it would have took them forever, and it was Christmas Day, and we were trying to get to Christmas party, and but I've never lost my license for that. I've had other stuff that I've done that have kind of, screwed up my driving a little bit, but today I don't have to worry about it.
Where I am in Wood County, it seems like we don't have a lot of public transportation. And so one of the things that I've heard about is that it's hard to get services when you can't get to them. And it's hard to get the child care that you need to attend the services that you need when you can't get transportation. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody listening who may not have heard about that, because part of recovery is getting those driving privileges again, getting that driver's license, getting insured again.
And getting a car. A lot of times you don't have a car, you sell it or getting a vehicle. I didn't have a car for the first 5 months that I got sober. So, and I had to work to get a car. I had to save up money and buy a car.
I want to talk about identity for just a second. When I was making these faith community discussions about opioid addiction and hosting them at my church, and you were speaking at them, one of the things that I learned is that people who are in recovery do not want that to be their identity. Every time somebody who knows that they've had an issue and they're in recovery does not want somebody to come up and the first thing is saying, "Are you still sober?" Can you address how identity is to be handled?
There's a lot of controversy in between people calling themselves addicts and people calling themselves people in recovery. A lot of wording. People look at that, but this is how I look at identity and all that. There's a crisis right now, and there's an epidemic. And if people are worried about how other people are thinking about them, nothing's going to change in this epidemic. I'm very open about my recovery. I mean, I think I've kind of created that. I put myself in a position where pretty much everybody in Ohio, in Northwest Ohio, knows what I do. And I'm okay with that because I always want to be a resource. And if I hide that identity, I'll never be a resource. But there's people that have corporate jobs that don't want people to know that they're in recovery, and I understand that. So, it's really going to come down to the person and what that person's got going on.
Say there's somebody that I know, and I know they're in recovery, and they don't want to talk about it, but I want to know how they're doing. How do I find out how they're doing?
You'll be able to look at them and tell them if they're okay. I mean, if they look really sad, depressed, last time you saw them, they've lost a lot of weight since the last time you saw them. If you see any kind of signs like that, then it never hurts to ask anybody how they're doing, whether they're in recovery or not. But if you come in and say, "Hey, are you still sober?" That's a little different. But if you're like, "Hey, how's things going? It's good to see you." I mean, that's how I would approach it. I mean, I still have people that I know that aren't doing well, but I still ask them like, "Hey, how's it going? Is everything okay?" Everything's good. Well, I'm glad things are good. If you ever need anything, let me know.
Very good. All right, I'm going to wrap this up by asking you one last question. what is a piece of advice that you would give anybody out there who either needs help with drug addiction or knows somebody who needs some help?
That it's okay to not be okay. Don't hold it in. Talk to somebody about it. And if you know somebody who's using drugs and alcohol, intervene with it as soon as possible. And don't worry about how it's going to affect you. Worry about how it's going to affect that person. You know, that person that's using drugs, if you worry about how they're going to feel about you, if you try to intervene with them, you're going to save their life. It's not a joke anymore. You know, it was fun and games back in the day when we were partying and having fun. But now people are dying. People are losing their lives. People are losing their families. People are losing everything because of this epidemic. So if you know somebody who's using drugs and alcohol, intervene with it immediately. And if you have that fear of intervening with it, you personally, call the police. Local police nowadays have a little different look on people that are struggling with addiction. You know, most first responders, most police officers, they're there to help now. Intervene. Call the cops. If you don't know how to intervene, talk to people who are resources that know how to do that.
Fair enough. Well, thank you, Nate, so much for being with me on one of my very first podcasts. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you or reach out to the Recovery Institute of Ohio, how would they find you?
We have a website, recoveryinstituteofohio.com. We have a Facebook page, Recovery Institute of Ohio. And then I'm always open about giving my personal cell phone number out. It is 419-262-2436. If you call me and I don't answer, leave me a message and I definitely will call you back.
All right, and I'll have all that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Pharmacist Voice podcast with me, your host, Kim Newlove. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to subscribe and read the show notes. That's thepharmacists with an S, voice.com.